Hey Bitstocks family, it's Krista from the marketing team here again, and today I'm going to answer one of your frequently asked questions. Do I need to understand Bitcoin to use Gravity? Well, the answer is absolutely not. Think about the internet. Most of us don't really know much about its detailed technical setup, but we can use a web browser to look up the latest news or to shop online. Here at Gravity, we believe the same is possible for Bitcoin, which is why we do our best to avoid complicated terminology wherever possible. We want Gravity to give you the best experience of using BSV without drowning you in jargon or setting a high bar of technical understanding. Our aim is simply to enable new people to join Gravity and to use our services without even having to know that Bitcoin is the secret sauce behind the scenes, making it all work. Although, if you would like to broaden your knowledge of Bitcoin, then we have got loads of great blogs for you. Just Google Bitstocks blog for more. That's it for now. Catch you guys soon, and I hope you enjoy the podcast.
Hello and welcome everyone to another episode of the Bitstocks Podcast, and we have George Samuels. So, the wolf, as we declared in our last conversation, right? Bro,
yes.
As we were just saying, man, it's been a minute. It's been a minute, right? Normally we'd like to try and catch up personally. In fact, the last conversation we had personally was quite interesting, and we ain't picked up on that yet. How you been, bro? How's life?
How's life, man? You know, I can't complain. I know there's a lot happening in the world right now, but you know, I find myself halfway around the world in Latin America, where I didn't expect to be, but I'm grateful. You know, a lot of good things happening, all things considered. So I'm just counting my blessings at this point in time.
So 2020 then, sounds like it was transformative. It definitely had you moving around. Right?
Yes.
But you've done a lot of positive stuff in that time as well. But with just what you said there, sounds like there's definitely some challenges that you had along the way. But yet, from 100%. At least my perspective, not having spoken to you in a little while, you've done some great stuff in the space, right? You launched a new business. You're effectively launching a new cultural movement, which I'd love you to explain about a little bit more. But it sounds like it's been a bit of a challenge as well.
Yeah, 100%, man. Like with anything that we're doing in this space, right? There's always going to be challenges.
Unpack it a little bit for me. So talk to me about Hona. Yeah.
So Hona, I guess for those listening who aren't familiar with the product or haven't heard about it, Hona.io, Hona. So Hona actually started, the idea for it I actually had around the time that I started Faia. So what's been interesting is over the last 2 years, I was doing some digging in my own my old archives, right? Stuff that I just written to myself and what have you. And the idea for Faia and how this is connected to Hona is that at the beginning when we created Faia, it was, we knew that we had to sort of build up our brand and reputation, clients, et cetera, right? And we started off with consulting because that I knew would be a way for us to get a feel for the Asia Pacific market. But the plan was always to create a product, right? And especially one that could leverage, Bitcoin-based technology. And then 2020 happened, and an opportunity came to actually sort of experiment or release that product that I had envisioned. And this product actually was a solution to another community we've been running over the last 5 years called the Pack, right? So, it was all around accountability, productivity. And so we realized that this particular product could be a great way for people to actually honor commitments. So, everybody has their goals and whatnot, but, how can you take that a little bit further and actually start tracking proof of work in relation to a goal? So we started experimenting with that with sort of a prototype in Slack. We created a Slack bot that was automating a lot of the things that are based on our own methodology of getting people to be more productive in teams, even if they're working on their own stuff. And then we realized, hey, there's something here, especially during the pandemic. People were trying to find ways to stay more productive while being isolated, right? And so we said, you know what? Why don't we try actually turning this into a product and then start pitching it, see where it goes. And then that's what led me to Tim Draper, actually. So for those who aren't familiar,
I think it's really interesting. Yeah. Good.
And after seeing in the BSV space, a lot of the investments were being made within the bubble, right? mostly from BSV people, Calvin Air, whoever else, Unbound Capitals, like really great, right? And that's what's needed. But I wanted to see if our ideas would be able to have merit outside of the bubble, right? Without mentioning Bitcoin at all. And so I put myself into one of their courses, which culminated in a pitch session at the end. And it was just a couple of weeks program. And then there was about 80 startups from around the world. I think only 40 made it to the last session. And then out of the 40, mine made it to the top 3. And then we actually won the actual pitching competition.
My guy.
And it was crazy because before we started it, we were already experimenting with paid customers, right? We just told people the idea, showed them a little bit in Slack, and they're like, hey, yeah, I'm happy to pay for this. And we learned a lot of things about people's sort of, goals, commitments, etc. And then when we pitched it, and Tim Draper himself saw this as a solution for himself, that's when we knew we were onto something, because he was like, yeah, I'm struggling on my own, not being able to contact people. I would love to be able to, make these small bets with folks. And so we were like, okay, there's something there. And one of my rules for any startup product is, before you start building, validate it with paying customers, or at least a ton of signups, right?
Yeah.
If you're not going to ask them for money. I prefer that because at least people are willing to put their money where their mouth is. Yeah. And that's pretty much what the product is.
Yeah. So do you code?
Yeah. So I used to be a programmer.
Makes sense. Mm-hmm. Makes sense. Well, not necessarily that it does make sense. Well, one, it's a fucking kick-ass skill. It's one that I haven't gone off to do. But you clearly have a very human approach, right? A very psychological driven approach, which community is the center and always has been center with Faia as well. Now, as you just explained, Hona, clearly it's still the center. So was that something that you started to learn to code and then start to implement because you wanted to build these tools? Or is that something that came a little bit later on where you was like, oh, do you know what? Okay, I can code and my vibe is 100 community and building tools for community. These skill sets now marry up. I mean, which one came first?
Okay, if we go back to I've always been mad about, tech from a very young age, right? I remember even in high school, I'd always take any computer-based classes or even mathematics courses that were related. This is the crazy thing, right? Math, I never enjoyed. But when it was mathematics applied to like computer science and stuff, it made sense for me.
Same.
Right?
Yeah, same.
Because it gave context and I excelled in it. And then, so the programming stuff just came out of a love and an interest first. And then all of the community stuff actually did come later. I didn't realize that would be a thing until my first job. I was a front-end developer for my first job. And I actually I could not see myself doing that as a career, like full-time. So this was the funny thing, right? So, they're programming all day, every day. And I was just like, you know what? Not enjoying this as much as I thought I would. And then actually within our team, even the team lead and the managers, they kept pushing me to be the front face to the client. Because none of the programmers were client facing. They didn't like talking to the client, right?
Yeah. Very binary. Just put it in front of me, I make.
Correct. So they were like, George, you can talk. So why don't you talk to them? And then that's when I started to learn.
George, you're human. You do it. You do the human bit.
So that's when I realized, actually, I enjoyed that part a lot more. But one thing I realized was that I had an ability to translate these technical things into normal speak for non-technical folks. And I think that probably paved the way towards Faia in the end as being this bridge between communities and technology, right? Community stuff came also later on too, because it wasn't even a profession at one point, right? Then early 2010s, that's when I stumbled upon being a community manager for a co-working space. And then I just blended all that together to make Faia. And now, a couple of years later, I'm seeing all this interesting community stuff in general. And definitely within the crypto space, community is a big thing for a lot of projects.
100. So what's the next stages then for Hona? What's the next stages?
Yep. So we have spent the first quarter just sort of getting the basic foundation set up. And I'm happy to talk about this here on your show. Is our strategy for Hona actually is about helping, because the target market is not BSVers. The target market is who we were solving for, which is people struggling with productivity and accountability, right? So because of that, we have taken a hybrid approach whereby we're actually providing people a traditional and non-traditional experience, right? So in it, when people actually sign up, there is the option to make payments in your traditional way, using Stripe, PayPal, credit card, etc. But then what we're doing is, because I'm familiar with product design, right? We're actually implementing the BSV side as sort of the upsell, right? And we're making it so that, okay, if you use these BSV features or options, you will actually get these benefits.
That's smart.
Yeah,
that's smart.
Because I learned this in change management as well, right? Dealing with communities. When we're doing technology rollouts, people need something familiar first, right? If they're changing a really big behavior. And then you match the things that they're used to with what you're trying to achieve with the new technology or innovation, right? And so what we're doing is we're then actually going to do this because there's been a building in public movement online as well on Twitter, right? So a lot of startups are now trying to build in public. And that's its own hashtag. And so what we're going to do is we're actually going to start sharing with people publicly what we're building, because if we're talking about trust,
I like that.
People will get involved in the journey, in the story. They'll feel part of the community, and we'll actually get them to understand, okay, this is why we're setting it up this way. And then people will just ask the questions naturally about, BSV scale, like what we're seeing in the NFT space, right? So that's why I've been enjoying what I've been seeing in the NFT space, because it's starting off with a cultural shift, because I see, other people doing this, and then they're hitting technical limitations and they're asking the right questions.
100%. 100%. So the way I've articulated it is, we've spent 12 years arguing about Mario or Luigi, right?
Yeah,
plumbing.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, plumbing. Exactly.
That's basically it. It's just plumbing.
Yeah.
Arguing, my plumbing's better than your plumbing. And with this NFT stuff, what I see, just as you said, this is now the house. This is the experience. This is now mainstream, walking into a house viewing, say, oh, this is a nice kitchen. This is a nice bathroom. This is a nice bedroom. I could really visualize and simulate how my life would be chilling, having a cup of tea on this balcony. Right?
Yes.
And the only time that lovely couple or family is going to question their plumbing is when they do try to take a shit, and it don't go nowhere, right? And there's a problem.
Like, what the fuck?
They can be on the blower to the plumber, done. But we've never gone on I've never gone on a property viewing and asked the letting agent or the sales agent the brand and the scalability of ultimately the plumbing. I just expect it to fucking work.
Exactly.
Right? So I fully resonate with that, bro. I fully resonate with that. And this does provide that opportunity. And what makes it hyper interesting, though, is at what scale is the plumbing still working? And that's then becomes a real interesting conversation where obviously SV excels, and you could build a little micro house for little stick men, or you can build a huge, massive house for the Nephilim.
Correct. Yeah, exactly.
You can do whatever.
No, and it is a good point you bring up of this, because the scaling bit, right? Most people don't realize there was a documentary that came out on Netflix called Seaspiracy, right?
I've not watched this yet.
Now, I get some of the criticisms already because it's a bit incomplete and it's a specific narrative, right? To expose the fraud. Like, that stuff has existed like this entire time, right? But what it did sort of also support what I already felt as a hunch, right, about what was going on around even these marketing movements around, no plastic straws, right? I always had a feeling that it wasn't going to be enough. And this is the thing about when it comes to change. Sometimes, some people say, it starts small, right? And in some instances, yes. But in things like this, you need a massive sort of shift in order for anything to change.
But talk to me about that, because we're in an age of cancel culture.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So with what you just said, and slot that phrase in there now, what's going on? How do you see the landscape? And that's very oppressive way of shifting cultural understandings.
Now, the cancel culture, again, there's nuances to all this, right? So it's just like, even in the Bitcoin space, when we say things, like when we're talking about shift, right? I personally do think the BSV strategy of focusing on the enterprise and the bigger players is a good one, because we're dealing with infrastructure, right?
Yeah.
It might not apply as much if we're just talking about consumer-facing things. right? Because there are actually sort of different rules when you're dealing with infrastructure level things and everything on top of, right? So, with regards to cancel culture, this, to be honest, I think it's just a stage. It's like teenagers, like going through like a rebellious stage. And to me, it is getting a bit ridiculous, but it is also a sign of sort of the massive cultural distrust in general.
Do you think the shit's rolling uphill though? Do you think it's teenagers and their opinions and how teenagers are now culturally influenced that are now rolling uphill to corporations that are now influencing, oh, you can say this, can't say this, can't say. I mean, I can see why, obviously, from a monetary standpoint, that audience is incredibly lucrative to the corporation. So there's clearly a feedback loop. It's an undeniable feedback loop. However, I think the way that media has wielded this sword is highly weaponized. And I think in order to indoctrinate the lower tiers and the lower systems.
I think that, as you said, that feedback loop is an important one, because I think sometimes, depending on which side you're sitting, right, there's a tendency for, I guess, the side that feels like the victim to say that there's a propaganda, conspiracies. Now, not all conspiracies are false, right? Like, we know that, like, some of them, there's truth to it, right? What I'm saying is that, like, there is this feedback loop whereby, because it's feeding into each other, you don't know what is actually the source or what's fueling what a lot of the time. And
a perfect example of that, if I was to ask you, okay, someone with a mask and then someone without a mask, who would fit into the box of being a conspiracy theorist?
Depending on when you're looking at this, right? What time? Yeah, right. When you're looking back, current day,
But that's like the cognitive dissonance is at such an all-time high now. That's what I mean. It's getting to that point where it's so in our face, and it's aggressively so in our face, which is why I do think the approach, bro, you've always been on this vibe. To be honest, it's so important that it touches tech. Because I do see technology as a liberator of man. It's our enslaver, but also see it as our liberator if it's built on these transparent foundations and community building, circular economic foundations, in order to break through this narrative that we have right now, where we have very little say and influence, but we are being bombarded with a hell of a lot of influence without really being able to validate the proof of work as to why you're telling me that I need to do this or do that.
Yeah. But I mean, I think I go to belief systems again, right? And this is why culture and community stuff really is fascinating to me, because you look in Asia, like they're already creating like these travel safe bubbles between one another. China, of all places, is like now kind of like free from, the coronavirus stuff. Meanwhile, the Western world is like fighting over each other about whether to wear a mask or not. Like, come on. Like, I understand that the mask issue is more of an impingement on people's sense of freedom. And that's the issue. Not really the mask itself, it's what it represents. Because I'm telling you, in Asia, it's not even an issue, right? It's just put it on because people have been already doing it because of pollution in general, right?
100. Right? That's always been the case. Yeah. Anyone that's been to China would know or Asia, period, that's always been the case.
Exactly. Yeah. So people put it on for a practical reason, not because of Corona originally, but more because of like the pollution in general. Like I remember when I was in Bangladesh, like 20 years ago, like I'd come back from school after playing football, and like there is all this black stuff in my nose, in my nostrils, like when I go to shower, right? That's just general like smog and pollution. And so it made sense later on when there was a culture of masks coming on, right? Yeah. They weren't worried about like their freedom being impinged. It was just a practical thing. So when Corona came and people were asking like, fuck it, okay, I'm already doing it, fine. But I've been noticing that the West, it's because it impinges on a sense of freedom, which is a strong value point. It's gotten to just levels of ridiculous now because you have other people who are, especially if they're more concerned about health, right? You have people who are concerned about the business, economics, and jobs. But then you also have people who are more concerned about the health and the community and those sort of things. And those two things in the West are at conflict. And I don't see this getting any better anytime soon, unfortunately.
Yeah. I think it symbolizes humanity's distrust in one another.
Yes.
Yes. And it forces us to objectify one another.
Yes.
And that is what I found the most challenging aspect, and also how I've adjusted myself as I've navigated, because even at the beginning I was quite rebellious, angry, but then I became incredibly empathetic. because I've always been quite rebellious and anti-authoritarian,
I feel you.
especially with police, bro. Like growing up and stuff, right? Different altercations I had personally with police. I've always done relatively well from it. I've always outperformed my peers. And that has always had me getting pulled over way more than I should be getting pulled over, and having conversations far more frequently with police that I shouldn't be having conversations about. And I've gone through so many waves as a human being as to how I've dealt with that, right? From the bullshit influences as to what I see in, say, media, what I saw as a child with the way my dad responded to police, which was always a terrible example to follow. And all the issues I have in myself just as a man, I've now got opportunity to vent and to channel this energy towards this officer who, for maybe like 60% of the time, is probably actually genuinely just doing his freaking job.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
But if you walk into where we are now, we're based in the Olympic Park in London. So our local place to get lunch with the team is we walk up to Westfield. And Westfield now is effectively a legit police state. You've got the security guards on one side, you've got police officers on the other side. You've got the speaker system in the shopping mall. Yeah. With that oppressive, almost sounds futuristic message saying, everyone maintain your social distancing. Please make sure that when you're navigating your way through the shopping center, wear your mask. Like I just feel like I'm in some futuristic BS like endgame movie. And then a police officer comes up to me, always like, you need to be wearing a mask. Okay. Before, my initial reaction when this all kicked off is old Mike and the trauma of old Mike came forward, and I started to get a little bit aggressive, puffed up my chest, all the rest of it, right? And then I spoke down to the officer because I'm able to intellectually that this person ain't gonna be able to do anything. But really on a human level, Mike, what did you just achieve? Is that officer now gonna stop what he done and how he approached you with the next person? So you ain't saved the next person, you probably made it worse for the next person. So I started to really reflect and look at myself and say, okay, I don't like what's going on. And I have a really great understanding of what's going on, which triggers my frustration because I understand what is going on and what ultimately you're really saying to me that you don't even realize you're really saying to me. You don't understand the puppeteers behind why you're doing what it is that you're doing to me right now, right? But the fact that you don't see that is not why I should punish you for not seeing that. I now feel empathetic that you don't understand this. And I think that is now what makes me feel we're in a very dangerous territory right now as a global collective. And ultimately, the only thing that's going to pull us through this is love, admittedly.
Yes.
But we need to communicate that love with a very strong message, my bro.
And feedback loops, right? We were just talking about this, when, because of your experience, right? And then that's how you perceive the world, right? And then these scenarios, these situations occur that reinforce the belief, right? Even if that might not be the truth of the situation, as you said, like they might just be doing their job. But because, these patterns that you've had before are presented again, it's just another reason for you to flare up and to get angry at them and project it all onto them. And for the cops on their side, it also then reinforces their belief that you are exactly what everybody says you are.
Yeah.
100. And then it's that vicious loop. And that's where it has to start from somebody, right? To even, if you also change like your approach like you did, then it also changes, it also provides almost like an exception to the rule for the officers because they're like, oh, I didn't expect this person to have this reaction to me. Maybe there is hope. Maybe there is, a way to change this.
But with that being said, and it's like, I had to really reground myself. 2020 was an amazing year for me. It was full of challenges like it was for everyone. But the conquering of those challenges, because a lot of these things were like simmering for years anyway, but it all came to their fore in 2020 in this world stage of all of this change. But I was very, very, very mindful to utilize the time and conquer these challenges to make sure that irrespective of what it is that's going on, that I can find my center as quick as possible. But it's like and I'm glad that I've done the back work for the years it is that I've had to be able to navigate 2020 the way it is that I did. But dude, it's like every month almost like every 2 weeks at some point, there's some new event that contracts and contracts and tests and tests and contracts and contracts and tests and tests, and it's gripping. And right now, there's not really any any real organized, reformed pushback. That's going to see us in some different state. And I think we put a sprinkling of what's going on in our space and the amount of big, huge corporate actors that's now come forward. It's like they've got a whole actors roster list of pumpers, including the likes of the richest man on the planet, right? With Elon, in order to add seasoning and flavor to this cognitive dissidence. So my question is to you, I guess, is what do you see as being our right defense mechanism, and how big does our vibration, what raises our vibration collectively? Is basically what I want to ask you.
Yo, man, I mean, you already answered this, right? Love. And as simple as that is, like, it is so true. And I understand more and more as I get older why people say that it is, right? And it's not the type of love where, like, you know, just gonna go out, you know, being a hippie, you know, and just like, you got to do what's in line with you, right? And your personality too. There are many different ways to express love. And it does start with yourself when it comes to defense. Like, I think this is the time. I do see some problems in certain countries where this whole pandemic period is a great way for authoritarian types to like muscle their way in, implement stuff that they've been trying to do for a long time. But, you know, people have been, you know, out and about, active, because now most people are, you know, staying at home usually. But I think it's interesting because looking at this astrologically, right? I mean, we've talked a bit on this as well. Like, I am constantly looking at sort of like what are the patterns or the seasons coming up. And one of the things I've been looking at, even over just like the next 5 years, 10 years, some of the patterns there that are being talked about is, you know, this is going to get a lot worse before it gets any better, you know? And it is, you know, we look at sort of, I use volcanoes as an example of, you know, in the moment, it's a lot of destruction, right? But through death also comes rebirth. Phoenix probably being a great symbol, right? And I personally believe we've been in this position before, many times before, right? But humanity still continues on. But the question always is how do we interpret what is being done to us? Do we see it as a lesson and improve? Or do we just go, I want to get back to what I was doing before and, you know, screw whatever we were just doing, you know? And I'm seeing that for some people.
I fucking love you, man. Honestly, what you're touching on there is it. And what I want to dance on with that, and then really hope people think about this and postulate this is, and this actually ties into Bitcoin, funny enough as well, is at what scale, right? So we should look at, say, astrology, right? And our astrology and the link and the thread between it all is it creates our cycles, seasons, months or moons. It defines how life on this planet dances, right?
Yeah.
But if we talk on, I'm always hesitant to even to get into this, but because it's you, I'm going to talk about it.
Yeah, for sure, brother.
If we talk about the battle of good and evil, what perspective are we speaking on that? If I fill a room full of human beings, you're going to have some good, some bad. But then the question is of what percentage, and then I could brand a room as a good room or a bad room. Because there's good and bad in everything, but overall, of what polarity is the room? I need to put a marker on it. Is it good or is it bad, right? And then I extend the room to the building. I extend the building to the local district, city, country, planet, right? But the same metric, good or bad, right? So now I look at the planet and think, okay, I'm on the moon. I'm sitting there, I'm kicking it, I'm chilling it. I'm looking at planet Earth. Right? And I'm asking the same question, what do I brand it? Do I brand it good or do I brand it bad? Positive or is it negative? I know you're always going to have both, but by what ratio do we define that experience? So I think then I say, okay, well, Mike, you're still thinking too small. Because if you're then talking about the universal whole, the one, and we all are birthed from that original sound, and then the wave that predated the particle, and we're all a formation of the original seed, then, okay, well, you've got all of these other planets. You've got our solar system. Again, I got to brand our solar system now. Is it good? Is it bad? Then I've got my star cluster. Is it good? Is it bad? My galactic spiral. Is it good? Is it bad? You get what you get what I'm saying. So if we then talk about the concept of God, source, this experience or experiment, this ever expanding universe that's always learning, right? Of course it's expanding because creation is expansion, right? It's always learning. And as you said, death is a new beginning. The symbol of the phoenix, right? Is that you rise from the ashes and you dawn a new age, right? The story of Osiris chopped up into 14 pieces. 14th piece fell into the river Nile, consumed by the fish, and he was reborn as Horus, right? The stories of Thoth, right? The Atlantean priest king, halls of Amenti, conquered immortality, right? By taking his memory forward, by mastering the Akashic record. So clearly there's this huge vastness. When I think about life, I think about life on Earth. I think about Mike is one human on this planet that's in a sea and an ocean and a cosmic ocean of other planets, right? Which all ultimately, if this whole experience is truly genuinely connected and there is a source, what does the source expect of itself? To be good or to be at what ratio? So and then I look at the Earth timeline and I see that we're very clearly, it's very easy to see the mark of the beast timeline right now. And artificial age and the satanic agendas that are very much presenting themselves on a planet right now. There's this new craze going on with, was it Little Nas? Etc.
Don't know about it.
Okay, you don't want to know about it. Bro, don't Google it. And anyone, just don't bother Googling it, right? But with everything that's going on, this huge, massive overreach, so localizing it back down now, okay? Huge, massive overreach of government power, right? We've got this pandemic scenario. So my thing is, it's like, okay, how much tighter is the grip really, truly going to get? And what is going to be that huge, massive wave of that realization moment where we define what the label is on this planet, right? Because collectively we can do what we're doing here. So like, so when you're saying, okay, cosmologically or astrologically and these different seasons, etc., a date that keeps coming up when I study these things, and my friend circles who study these things, is 2024 seems to be very significant energetically from what I'm seeing and what is being told. And of course, in and around the 2030 time period. So I know Bitcoin is a huge role in that. I've been quite vocal saying I believe Bitcoin is a digital recreation of the Akashic record. Okay. I believe that we are in the re-emergence of Atlantean times. Genuinely. I believe that time is now. Okay. I think that time has already been here for a while, but in terms of public acknowledgement, that time is now. I could expand on that in a bit, but Bitcoin's role is the Akashic record. It's memory. It's planetary memory. How quickly do we need to make that very established in order for the positive jolt in what you've just referenced about astrology? Because we all got our role in that, bro.
Yeah, no, I know. It was interesting. I was actually watching a documentary last night with the Miss called Atlantis Rising with James Cameron on National Geographic, right? And interestingly enough, like for me, I come from the Lemurian Mu side, right? We talked about this before. And I know that the sort of role between the Lemurians or the Mu and the Atlanteans is kind of like how we see West and East at the moment. The West is very much playing that Atlantean role, again, in terms of the technology focus. You already have billionaires who are making technology their god. which was the cautionary tale of the Atlantis story,
Yes.
right? They pushed technology too far to try and control, and it had massive impact for everybody on the planet, right? They went too far and sank their cities or what have you. Now, of course, there were a lot of refugees from that went out to other civilizations, maybe laid the foundations for them. But I heard that there have been many Atlantean souls, right? Some say that many Atlantean souls have been sort of reincarnating over these last, centuries.
Yeah.
And so this goes back to why I called Faia, and why I've got this focus on the other side, the non-technological side, is because of balance. And when I talk about balance or harmony, right? Understanding my belief system is that the duality is an illusion to begin with, right? But it is there for the one, the creator, the source to experience itself. Because what I learned about the Lemurians or the Mu is that they actually were like the third iteration of us, right? They hit a point where they had actually done everything they wanted to do collectively and then decided to sort of restart again, And in doing so, that's where you sort of create that, I think it's called the Lucifer experiment, right? When you are everything, how do you experience yourself further? Well, you create that which you are not. And so, it was created to serve a purpose of that experiment.
The internal philosophy I even articulated externally on CoinGeek was, for gravity, the inspiration is to be everything yet nothing.
I've seen that.
That is also points towards the squared circle relationship, also story of Osiris, and what you just said there, 124875. So that is the cellular, it's the cellular mitosis sequence, right? And this is also the link into mathematically the biological link in Bitcoin, because Bitcoin, it divides, it goes backwards, it's 57842. But that's the distribution sequence for the mining process, the reward, block reward. It is that process. The visibility aspect comes into it as well when it comes to Bitcoin in particular, in cells in the body. And finally, we talk about AI, artificial intelligence, this timeline. This is why I really see Bitcoin as having a huge role. I'm going to be sketchy around the details on this because it's stuff that we're basically working on here. But to hear that you have had these aspects inspire what it is that you're doing, like for me, it just makes me excited, bro, to be honest. 'Cause it means I'm not the only weirdo.
No, bro, definitely not.
Like, I'm super not the only weirdo. But tell me a little bit more about the luminaries. You said this is our third iteration, and so what's your further understanding of what that means to us today?
So yeah, just as a note for people listening in, right? Like because I come from a oral storytelling culture, right? Like my ancestors' oral traditions and what have you. Stories, we don't look at as necessarily literal, right? They serve a purpose, but they are based on some form of truth from the past. And it was always the role of sort of like the elders or the master storyteller to be able to decipher properly. And I think that's what we actually have a problem with currently. You can look at facts and data, but sometimes, there's levels of interpretation required, right? It's thinking of Thoth, like very much when I, read his works, there's so many levels to it, to the initiated and the uninitiated, right? Even in our cultures, like songs would be shared, right? And so to a kid, it would just be this nice sounding song. To an elder, it like has a completely different meaning, And so I guess coming back to the sort of third iteration, I believe that from what I've studied, I take it with a grain of salt, but we are apparently the fifth version, right, of this. And if you look at sort of, archaeological finds and whatnot, it's so fascinating to see us look at them thinking that just because we're ahead in our construct of time, that we are supposed to be better. What if, we are actually just gotten to the point that our ancestors actually got to already once upon a time, right? This linear thinking, Arrival, that other movie, I don't know if you've seen that, that film, right?
No, I haven't. But I completely understand the concept that you're saying, though. But I'll just let you finish. Carry on. Go on.
time we think of as linear, but to some other beings or species, what have you, time is something all at the same time, right? I know you know this, right? But that's a really good movie to sort of illustrate my point. Is that our construct, like one of the things that, especially over the last decade, I'd say, is that we interpret the world based on what we've learned, right? But there hits a point where you have to realize, okay, what if what I've learned about the world is negatively influencing my ability to see truth, right? We all come with our biases. And if we're looking at the Atlanteans and also the Lemurians, and we're talking about this, right? On the Atlantean side, it was all science, technology, mathematics, etc. That's its own language and culture. The other side to the equation is to do with these feeling aspects, right? Which can't always be interpreted in mathematics, etc. And that I feel, even with Craig sometimes, and he said this, right? He doesn't always have the ability to empathize. So that means that even his system will have some holes. As we've seen, when he released Bitcoin to the world, people took it in another direction, unintended. For him, it was logical that stick to this path. Whereas not understanding the empathy, feelings, love, all of that, this part is also what had me stumble upon the prophecy of the eagle and the condor. I don't know if you remember us talking about this last time, or if we did. Okay, so there's this prophecy from South America about a time when the eagle and the condor would come back and fly together in the same sky. And the eagle represented sort of the north or the west, right? The science, technology, air. And then the condor people were the ones of the feeling side, right? This usually rooted back to the indigenous peoples, but anybody else who were more grounded in the feeling side. That prophecy said there would be a time where it would come back together, but they had to separate when Europeans started colonizing the world. Many indigenous elders and shamans, they knew that time would come, but it was in order to, again, experience things that, if we were all one before, we couldn't do as a single source. If you are everything and nothing, what else is there, right?
Yeah.
So for me, that resonated a lot back between 2008 and 2012. And these were sort of all the foundations that set me up for a decade later now in the work we're doing. And so what I see, that sort of coming together of the eagle and the condor, they prophesied that it would happen. It's just the timing right now, right? When? And I think this gets back to what you're asking about. It's when is that sort of time for things to rush through? My dates in my head are 2049 and 2150, right? This is why I have my eyes on the Pacific, all right? And the Pacific holds a very special place that kind of holds this energy around the condor side, right? And I feel the role of the Pacific is going to have a big role in terms of harmonizing what we're seeing in the world. And so, again, just like you guys are working on stuff, related to AI and Bitcoin, what I'm working on is everything around it, the glue between all that.
Yeah. I'm in so much resonance with what it is you're saying, bro. It's like I'm fighting myself to not educate. I'm so much agreement with what you're saying. So I'm just curious as to what you're going to say next. But also as well, I'm just like, I'm super agree. I want to say something right now. So with positive, negative, right? And I've really racked my brain with this recently. Okay. It's all well and good to say have an opinion on the satanic path, right? Or the path of darkness. Okay. And obviously a lot easier to resonate, well, for most, with a path of light, right? But what I really thought, okay, the technological influences, and I do believe Atlantean times, and also do agree with what you said about souls from Atlantis, right? And because again, if you study and believe the story of Osiris and what Thoth is teaching, then the ability for the 5-star formation to understand immortality as memory and bringing that memory forward and remanifesting a new square as long as you know your circle has been documented across ages, right? So if I operate on that vibration that I am not the shell, I am the being behind the shell, right? And I then ask the ultimate fundamental question. Why? Why is the path of darkness such, and what is the objective? And I look at the technology and things it is that I've come across, the whole agenda towards AI, agenda towards, say, eugenics and life extension, right? Now, I can understand intellectually why it's awesome to extend your life, okay? Atlanteans apparently lived for 900, 1200 years, right? And as we pulled away from that golden age, that cycle, right, our life expectancy shortened, right? But I understand through technology, predominantly, this is what alchemy is about a lot. You can reactivate, right? And you can extend. Cool. But then what they're apparently doing is even more invasive things in order to maybe live hundreds of years, thousands of years in local time, right? In local time. Now, that means that the process of education, meaning the encapsulation of information from other human beings into one being. Traditionally, we've all got a horse in that race, and we've got an 80-year horse in that race. So I learn from you, like, as I am right now. I pick up a book, I learn from others. I learn, and I'm encapsulating all of this information from other human beings into my one being, right? It's a great process, it's fun, but it's a very slow process, which is why AI and things like what Elon Musk is talking about with this whole matrix shit, I put my chip in, I upload it through my app, and now I'm a pilot. Yeah. Right?
I mean, that's what Craig is essentially doing with Bitcoin, what he's moving towards.
And again, I understand that. And to a degree, I see the benefits, and I think, again, like, cool, that's cool. However, if it is an extension because of control, and you want to make sure that other people don't realize that we already have Atlantean technology, and this is where this whole elitism aspect comes in, what is the fear, the trauma that has someone that wants to extend their life out through that long period of time, maintain that long degree of trauma? I mean, in its essence, bro, why? Like, why? I understand from a power, but money's not important here. I understand that you could potentially get off on oppressing a civilization and you enjoying the fruits of it for a generation, maybe a few generations, right? But multiple, but why? Like, is it and this is just questions in my own head now. Is it because you really, the ultimate denial of light is the judgment of light? And that now again has me back at empathy, right? Are you so scared of dad and dad's opinion as to what you've done on your record that you are delaying the judgment of, say, dad, right? As I say, it gets deep. And these are the crazy things it is that I've had floating around my head, in order just to get my own understanding and navigate my own, like, foundation.
I mean, it's an interesting question, but then the other question too is, like, what, more importantly, why does it matter to you?
For me personally, it doesn't. And I guess it does personally, because again, going back to the real core foundation, if everything is a mirror, right? Then I am because I am, which means I am also you. You are also me, right? So I have a vested interest. And this is what I mean by the whole, if I brand Earth as a polarity, I understand that I am part of that polarity, but I also understand I'm part of the thing that branded that polarity, right?
Correct.
So at the overall sense of what does he expect of himself, what's the ratio? Right? So that's where I'm curious. But also that's where I'm trying to follow this path of ultimately acceptance. There's clearly, I'm not going to vibe with doing certain actions. That's not what I mean by acceptance, but I accept that others are performing these types of actions, and just trying to understand psychologically why, right? And how that influences one path to the other, in order to get a further understanding of our self or itself.
Humanity is a paradox, right? Like, there's so much good and there's so much evil at the same time, right? And I understand, like, when you hear of, like, atrocious, seemingly evil acts, you go, like, why? But it's interesting because there's this documentary as well on Netflix called The Trials of Gabriel Fernandez. I don't know if you've heard of that one, but it's about this kid who died at the age of 8 as a result of continued abuse from his parents, right? Well, actually, it's his mom and her boyfriend. And, it brought to light the issues with the child services, right, system, all that sort of stuff. And when you first look at the mom at court, right, you're like, man, she looks evil. She's evil. But then it comes out later, you find out that she was gang raped when she was like the same age,
Yeah, feedback
right?
loops.
Yep, feedback loops, right? And then she ended up doing to her son what was done to her, right? The vicious cycles. And so this is why, like, sometimes when it comes to justice and the deeming of something as good or evil, it's so subjective as well, because
100.
there is the deeming of something good or evil at a point in time, the act, but then how far back do you go, right? What were their motivations? Was that act justified based on what happened to her? Some people would argue, no, it's wrong. She should be punished.
Yeah.
Yes. Take responsibility. Yeah.
So people probably did not expect us to be talking about this.
Probably not.
But I find a weird way of looping this back into Bitcoin. Right?
Yep.
It's all about scale in order to assess, I guess, judgment, or to have judgment. Scale, right?
Yep.
If I'm kicking it on the moon, I'm judging humanity. Not even culturally. Maybe I might get into culturally, like this country's like this country's like that, right? Yeah. But I'm definitely not at the city level, communal level. I'm very, yeah. And the further you go out, the more it is that you're going to do that. And the little details that to us is everything. In assessment from that scale is nothing.
Nothing, right? Exactly.
So when it comes to Bitcoin, and again, like division is multiplication, right? So you have 50 Bitcoins every 10 minutes, then it's 25 every 10 minutes. But at each different respective stage of dividing, you're doubling, so you're expanding and contracting at the same time, right?
Yep.
So the question then becomes, okay, at what scale is it still useful, right? So my notion is the blockchain is a piece of paper. Yeah. And the token is the pen that allows you to write on the piece of paper, the ledger, right?
Yep.
So if I snap a pen in half, as Bitcoin does, 50 to 25, okay, is that pen, how many pens do I have? Well, I had one and now I have two, as long as it's still useful, right? And I keep on doing it. And the question will be, how many pens do I have? And the answer will always be based on the perception of the individual you're asking. It's only a pencil if I can still use it. Correct. Right?
Yeah.
But with Bitcoin, because obviously we could go to the basically subatomic level, like with Satoshi's, okay, that pencil is exactly the same as it was at the highest macro scale, right? And now just like an ant is now using the pencil. Yeah. So it's scale, it's our perception, and then human beings, say people like you and I, can then tune into that, and we can build a business based on our perception, right?
Yes. Yep.
These other chains, say Bitcoin, you can't do that, right? They lock in what the ultimate perception is. And this is why I find the subject matter of Bitcoin so incredibly fascinating as to what it means on this planet. Because we can have it tag and simulate so many things. Like this body really hasn't been animated yet. And I really do think it is our best tool to bear light. Which brings me on to a last subject matter, Tuvalu.
Yeah.
Dude, talk to me, brother. What did you achieve over there?
What did I achieve over there?
That must have been a strong personal thing for you.
Oh, right? 100%.
A big, huge personal win. Because like what I know 100%. About you and the things that I know you care about. Just when I heard about the news, just from a very personal standpoint, I was just like, mad respect, bro. Mad respect.
Appreciate it, brother.
Talk to me about it. Run us through it.
So yeah, I've been doing a few different talks, right, about the Tuvalu project, and more from a high level and like what inspired it and how we got there. If I look back, it started a decade ago when I was actually doing animations. for called the series was called Tales from Nanumea. Nanumea being one of the 8 islands that make up Tuvalu. Mm-hmm. And at that time, I was creating those animations as a way of storing the stories and culture in case anything happened to the island. But I did feel at that point in time that, like, and this goes back to scale again, right? I was like, this makes me feel good. Like I have, I'm able to do something, and it makes other people feel good because of the storytelling. But how much is it actually going to change the plight, or how much is it actually going to do, right? Little did I know 10 years later that I'd be working on this type of project that actually provides, solutions, right? Outside of what most people or most specific nations rely on when it comes to climate change, which is foreign aid, right? And so, 10 years later, what actually happened was I wrote this article called The 5-Point Plan to Future-Proofing the Sinking Nation. And I put the sinking nation in quotes because I don't necessarily think that's the greatest way to think about Tuvalu, right? It puts them in sort of this like victim position as, small, helpless, help me. But I put this article out on Medium after being inspired by a conversation I had with my auntie, family, my mother, telling me many stories about the .tv renewal that was coming. So most people don't know that Tuvalu actually owns the top level domain of .tv. And they license it out to other American companies or just other companies that they have relationships with. Now, to date, I didn't think that they were getting the best deal because I was looking at the numbers and seeing how much they were getting for it. And I was like, classic story of these smaller nations, essentially being robbed or taken advantage of. And so I was like, this is messed up.
A penny just clicked there. I understand why cultural NFTs and okay.
yeah, it's coming. So right, it's all connected. So when so I'll jump back again 10 years ago, I was already thinking about, wouldn't it be great if as part of these stories, you could actually, like in the merchandise, you could actually link the merchandise with what you're seeing inside the animations that were handcrafted back in the islands of Tuvalu that created like new types of economies, right? They were speaking to each other. So yeah, this will get into NFTs after this. But jumping back now to here, the article, I put it out. I put the 5-point plan. Step number 4 was actually to go cashless or paper dash less, right? And that was where I saw Bitcoin come in as part of the 5-point plan. The first step was actually to open .tv up to a bidding war. So Tuvalu could see the actual value that people would be willing to bid on, right? Then the next was to actually start a digital sort of transformation program. And then third was to improve, use the money that they get from the .tv renewal to improve the infrastructure. Fourth was the cashless, paperless Bitcoin. And then fifth was use that money to actually secure land in other countries just in case anything happened. Nice. Right? Now, this is a solution that they hadn't really played with up to that point. At least not in my knowledge, and even till now, I haven't heard. And what's crazy is that after we started the project, 4 out of those 5 steps the Tuvalu government is now doing, right? And that was just from like this moment of inspiration.
That's amazing. That's amazing, bro.
It is insane. And in the article, I did write, that like I don't have context of everything happening in Tuvalu, right? So I don't purport to saying that this is a definitive thing. But from the angle of finding an alternative solution to their current problems due to rising sea levels, it has been a big front and center thing for them. Right? It's a very real threat because there are no mountains on Tuvalu. If there was a tsunami and they need to go up to higher ground, there's no higher ground. It's like this atoll, a flat-lying atoll.
Yeah.
Right? So for them, it's a serious thing. And if we look back, everything always comes back down to money, right? Dubai, even 10 years ago, like I remember they were already creating, their artificial islands, right?
Yeah, the world.
So you got these people, who have a culture that they want to preserve, whereas Dubai, they're just doing it for fun because they can, I'm just like, how do you like get that sort of shifted, like what
this
the
shit
hell?
Don't make sense here, man.
Yeah, but it comes back to economics, right? If Tuvalu finds a way for it to create or generate the revenue it requires, it doesn't need to rely on foreign aid. Now, of course, other sort of institutions get a lot out of Tuvalu continuing to be a helpless island, right? Because they get to have their name at the front. They get to, continue raising money to put into the country to say that, look, we're doing a good job. So this goes back to your deeming good or evil, whatever, right? Because there's perception of good and evil, and then the reality behind it too.
Yeah.
So how do you judge that? So there's that bit going on. So 9 months later, the Medium article that I published ended up getting shared amongst the Tuvaluan community, right? And then it eventually landed in the lap of Simon Kofe, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Justice, and Communications. And he really liked it. And so then we ended up, putting a Zoom call together, Amazing. Chatted. I took him through the plan. And then, he didn't really give too much away. But later on, after, 9 months, we ended up signing off on actually going through with it,
Wow.
And I think an important thing to note about this is I have parts Tuvaluan heritage, right? So that was sort of my way in as well. Because in the islands, it's still very kinship family oriented, for good and for bad too, because sometimes the family's politics can get in the way of progress, right? But in this instance, that was my way in, but I actually had a plan and the means to be able to execute on the plan.
I was just going to say on that, because that is what I believe the technology of Bitcoin changes for humanity, right?
Yes.
You had a common data point that brought about the conversation because there was a common data point, right? And also because you done it out of your own free will, like you said, 10 years ago, and you done the animations, they can tell that from a polarity standpoint, from these data points, that this is something that you've done and you actually feel genuinely about. That's important. Really, 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 really important.
It is.
But also that is the old guard way of controlling information and controlling how things happen. And that's all we've had really of, oh no, I know you're potentially cool because we come from X, Y, and Z, or we shared X, Y, and Z. I think the great thing about what Bitcoin could do is if your infrastructure is on this ledger, right, then I can get into an engagement quicker because I can validate somehow, depending on how things are set up, I can't screw you over, right?
Correct.
And then we should be able to have a lot more of these deals happen quicker. So what you're doing, that's significant.
And it was funny because in some of our calls, and obviously some details I can't share yet, but in some of our calls, it was really interesting because in Tuvalu, the trust is so high that things that in other countries would have high security over, right? In Tuvalu, it can just roam free, right? Like transportation of like very precious goods, right? Usually have bodyguards, that sort of stuff. In Tuvalu, like, your cousins will just take it from the plane and to the government building, right? They were talking about like, they're like, it's Tuvalu. Everybody knows everybody. So if you were to do anything like that, like you will hear from the community, like you will be, shunned, shamed. And this is where I think about like many of the islands, indigenous communities, they kind of figured out all the stuff that Bitcoin is doing.
Yeah, that's what it's pure. It's there already.
Pure,
it's pure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I remember writing in the Zoom chat, I was like, yeah, this is real life blockchain. And the Tuvaluans, they were also like, yeah, it is actually. And so for me, this is why I always resonate with Bitcoin because of my programming background. I remember reading the white paper, going even to the code and stuff. And I saw all of this is like a mathematical way of coding something that already existed for our peoples once upon a time, right? You look into the history of blockchain, the Yapese in Micronesia, we're already experimenting with, blockchain concept.
There's someone I would love to introduce you to.
Sure.
She made that reference herself. She's a queen mother. I won't say which one. Queen mother of Africa.
Nice.
Amazing woman. I made that exact same reference, about African communities, exact same reference. That's a connection that definitely needs to happen.
And, everything we've been talking about, the Akashic records, Bitcoin being that type of ledger, but it's just manifest in our world, right? To make it more tangible. There's the two layers. There's the technology piece, but if I look at it as that eagle condor prophecy again, right? So it's like the Bitcoin technology is like the eagle side, and then the cultural layer, that piece, right, with human beings is the condor bit. And those two need to marry because we're seeing also what happens when they're not in sync. You see BTC, That's where the control comes in. That's where they've been able to circumvent sort of Bitcoin's original path. And this is why also I do like the fact that Craig patented stuff after realizing
100.
you know, because that's kind of like the only way to fight against mobs and mob rule, you know. So using what currently exists to be able to secure that path. Now, granted, we've got a branding marketing issue. That's a different thing.
I hadn't noticed, George. I hadn't noticed. By the way, was that a more challenging mountain to climb for you with? Okay.
Well, like with Tuvalu?
Yeah.
Luckily, not as much because they're not on Twitter, right? Like they're not as they don't know about the politics. They don't know all this sort of stuff. Now, granted, when the news came out about us doing the project, you had people like Peter McCormick, you know, calling me a Muppet and for essentially scamming the whole country, right? One part of me is like, damn, fuck you. Like, I wouldn't have done this without the integrity of knowing what I was actually putting on offer, right? Because I still stand by what's popular is not always what's true. And I hate the fact that so many people use this word scamming left, right, and center. And who's true? Right? Like, what is the truth about that? Because everybody thinks that what they're saying is true, right? Like, so luckily that didn't impact too much.
You should take him to court. Take him to court on that one.
Fuck that shit. Like like the whole litigious culture as well, man. Like, I'm not for it because I understand for Craig, where it matters is in Craig's realm.
Yeah. His shit's different. There's a big game of chess going on there. If you just stay focused on one or two moves, you lose sight of the board. So I get what he's doing. Yeah.
Yes. And I understand when you're playing at a bigger level, that is going to come with the territory.
Yeah, 100.
Right? And it takes a lot of balls, so got to hand it to him. But yeah, for Tuvalu, it didn't matter too much. And actually, I did introduce Craig to the minister.
Nice.
And what was great about that was because Craig came from a legal background and the minister is also a lawyer in terms of his background, Craig was able to explain Bitcoin from that front. And it clicked for the minister, right? He's not interested in the price of Bitcoin and all that sort of stuff. He's interested in actual like long-term solutions, like intergenerational.
Yeah, technology.
This is where this is where scale and patents actually make a difference.
Absolutely.
Some people say it doesn't matter, but if you're a short-term thinker, that's all you're going to look at.
Exactly.
Right? And this is what I really respect about the minister, you know, Simon Coffey. He's already a trailblazer himself, right? He has like the big kahunas because he rejected $400 million from China to build artificial islands on Tuvalu.
My man.
Right?
My man.
Now, some people are like, oh,
big.
just take the money.
Nah,
right?
dude, that's big. That's the trap right there. That's big.
That's debt politics in the Pacific, man. The more I dug into the Pacific, I realized actually it's a huge battleground for the US, China, Australia. And my thinking was always like, everybody looks at the Pacific as like, you know, a holiday destination, but bigger players see it as much more strategic, very geopolitical. And the South Pacific Islands themselves.
You know, that stuff links into the other stuff we're talking about as well, which is why it's such a so attractive.
Yep. Right. And this is the thing. I've always enjoyed looking where nobody's looking. Right. Yeah. And, you know, even me talking about this, people now are probably going to start thinking like, oh, what is in the Pacific? Let me do my own research. Fine. But this is why I'm lucky that my birthing, my makeup was almost born for this time or 100. This particular project. Right.
Yeah.
I am Tuvaluan, Samoan, Fijian Indian, Australian citizen, and spent a lot of time in South and Southeast Asia. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like it's a unique sort of makeup that only makes sense now, right? Looking back, I'm like, holy shit! Like all of that actually lined up for this type of project. You know? Yeah.
Purpose, reasons, bro. You know the deal. You know the deal.
Exactly.
And we get activated along the way, and we realize, oh, of course. Right?
Yep, exactly.
It's beautiful to see, my bro.
Yeah. And it's, you know, already there are people's eyes on the Pacific now as a result of this project, governments too. And I'm glad, but I'm also very aware there's going to be a lot of responsibility involved with this. This is not just a technology implementation project.
Yeah, but what you've done though, man, is you've brought fire to the island, literally, right? and you've handed it over, and that as a tool is the illumination. That as a tool, if upheld, ensures that the shadows from overseas, coming from every direction, cannot cast on this island. That this island can be born and bared of light and will continue as such. And that's what Bitcoin provides. It's not, we could get rid of the shadows. Well, one great generation can do that. Okay. The next generation can fuck it up. Right.
Exactly.
So how do you make sure that Olympic torch stays on? And that is what Bitcoin does. That's what it can provide. Yep.
Eternal flame, man. That's how I see. And that's why the fire symbol is so strong. And the Pacific is a fire peoples. Both
you know what?
tectonic plates. Yeah.
I didn't even make that connection. I just had a little fire plug there.
Yep.
But 100, dude.
There's something called the Polynesian Triangle, right? Hawaii, New Zealand, Easter Islands, right? Triangle is also the alchemical symbol for fire.
Yeah. How deep into the Easter Islands are you? The whole story behind it.
I know a fair bit, and it's definitely on my places that I want to visit.
I'm going to have to come along for that.
Oh, bro.
That's on my list, bro.
New Zealand already has had a huge spiritual influence on me in my, I guess, timeline. Hawaii, the same thing. And so I just can only imagine what it's going to be like going to the Easter Islands.
Yeah, only recently I found out some interesting stuff around Easter Island. Not going to get into it because we have run out of time, everyone.
Yes. Yeah, fair.
But, bro, as always, man. Pleasure. There's nothing else to say. Just pleasure.
I know we can go on for ages.
100. Yep. And everyone, if you like this conversation, I know we covered a lot. Just hit up the comment box. And I'm sure there's opportunities to either pick up on some of the points in another conversation, or even maybe take some of this on Twitter or online, and we'll respond to some weird shit that we spoke about.
100%. It's time, man. It's time, right?
It is.
to talk about this stuff.
It is the time of Atlantis, the reemergence, and we're doing a much better job because the Akashic record can now be publicly known and useful to many. So with that being said, everyone, peace, love, and light. Take it easy. All the best. Hello, beautiful people. I hope you enjoyed that episode with George and you've been enjoying the recent episodes at the Bitstocks Podcast. And if you are, make sure that you go away and you like it. I'm waiting for you to like it. Do that now. You done it? Okay. Then comment. I'm joking. Yeah, comment. And please always share and spread the word. We're all about resonance at this company. So if you resonate, please spread the resonance. And if you really did like the references towards Bitcoin, Atlantis, and the Akashic record, definitely recommend you check out these two series. Got the What is Bitcoin, which is a one video explainer where I reference the Akashic record, and the Site series where we touch on a lot of the cultural issues in society and how Bitcoin applies. Until the next time.